Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this action party to you tonight. It will be just a few moments while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for more folks to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker trivia quiz that you'll see pop up in just a moment. Alrighty, you should be seeing that quiz now. We've got 3 trivia questions for you this evening. The first question is, in what year and location was the first electric vehicle developed? Secondly, getting us to the topic of tonight's conversation, what percentage of Americans who drove home a new or leased EV in 2024 took advantage of the federal EV tax credit? And finally, the Inflation Reduction Act, otherwise known as the IRA, which you'll hear lots about tonight, that passed in 2022 is the largest investment into climate change mitigation and adaptation in U.S. history. What percentage of the IRA investments to expand U.S. clean energy and clean vehicle projects have gone to Republican districts? While you're trying your hand at this trivia quiz, if you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so that we can all see each other. We will be recording this action party, and it will be available publicly online. If you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We will send out the recording tomorrow. If this is your first ever action party, let me give you a quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn about important environmental issues from people who are experts in their fields. In the course of the same hour, we will use the Climate Action Now app to take action together. The Climate Action Now app makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers and business leaders. To show you why it's so easy to take action with the Climate Action Now app, I will share my screen for just a moment. All right. So this is an example action like the ones you'll have access to tonight. It only takes 3 touches to take an action. First, you're going to touch Do It Now. Then you can choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're contacting. Because the app has your address, it automatically knows who your federal, state, and sometimes even local officials are. Then you just have to hit send, and you've taken an action. As you take actions, you're going to earn points. When you earn enough points, Climate Action Now plants a real tree on your behalf. So far, Climate Action Now has planted over 259,000 trees together. Let's share the results of our icebreaker poll now. Kaylee, would you share the results?
Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylee Beam, Climate Action Now's Director of Content, and I'm going to share the poll results now. So you should be seeing the results on your screen shortly. All right. So for our first question, the correct answer is 1832 in Scotland, almost 200 years ago. So around 1832, Scottish inventor Robert Anderson developed the first electric vehicle, but it wasn't until the 1870s or later that electric cars became practical. Anderson basically strapped a motor and a battery to a carriage, effectively creating the first horseless carriage. So good job to the 35% of you who got that right. So moving on to our second question, the correct answer is 87%. And here's a fun fact for you. On average, people who purchased or leased a new EV in 2024 saved $5,124 thanks to federal EV tax incentives. So if anyone on this call purchased or leased a new EV in 2024, congratulations. You can buy a lot of overpriced coffees with all that money. And for our last question, the answer is a whopping 85%. So even though no Republicans voted for the IRA, 85% of the investments and 68% of the jobs coming from IRA-funded clean energy and clean vehicle projects have benefited Republican districts. Of the top 20 congressional districts for clean energy investments, 19 are held by Republicans. So thank you for participating in a little trivia game to kick off our event tonight. And here is a virtual round of applause for all of you. Great work. All right, so before we hear from our all-star panel, I'm also responsible for getting you all ready to take some action tonight. So let me just share my screen. You should be seeing it shortly. There we go. All right. So if you're an Action Party regular, you already know all about our goal tracker, and you could probably do this spiel yourselves. But if this is your first time attending, let me walk you through what we're looking at. So on the left side, we have a lovely little globe that will fill in and iterate as we take action here tonight. On the right side is this QR code, which is what you're going to scan to get into the app. Obviously, some of you have already been in there and gotten to work, so great job. But for the rest of you, go ahead and take out your phones or tablets, open up your camera app, and point it right at the QR code box on the right side of the screen, under where it says Current Action. As you're pointing your camera at the QR code, a little yellow bubble that says Climate Action Now should appear. Once it does, just tap on it. Now, if you don't have the Climate Action Now app already, tapping that bubble will take you to the App Store where you can download it for free. Once you have the app, all you need to do is follow the prompts to sign up, and it will take you right to the Save the EV Tax Credits campaign, which is where you want to be for tonight. So everyone take a minute to get in there, and if it's not working for you, don't worry. You can also go to your phone browser and type in the link that's directly under the QR code. I'll also put that in the chat as soon as I'm done speaking here, but it's right here where it says CanApp link/save EV tax credits. So just like the QR code, it will take you to the campaign if you have the app, or to the App Store to download. And if you're still having trouble, that's okay. The campaign is going to be open long after today, and we'll share detailed instructions in our event follow-up email along with the recording. So yeah, once you're in, feel free to take action all event long. Our current goal is to hit 500 actions by the end of the hour, and I kind of think we're going to get there, but let's do our best. So that's all from me. Back to you, Liz.
Thanks so much, Kaylee. Finally, I want to share a special thanks for our moderator tonight, Jessica Craven, author of the hugely popular Chop Wood, Carry Water newsletter on Substack. Jessica is an ardent champion for democracy and other progressive causes. We'll put a link to Jessica's Substack in the chat. Before we hear from Jessica and our panelists tonight, we're going to start with a brief presentation by Brett Walter, founder and CEO of Climate Action Now. Over to you, Brett.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you everybody for being here with us tonight. I know we all have so many things to do. It's so great that you're here to learn about this issue and advocate to preserve the tax credits. I want to give special thanks to just 10 minutes here to do an overview of what's at stake. Special thanks to Samrat Pathania and Sam Mady for helping me with the charts. You'll see quite a few. And I'm not going to dwell on them, but you'll be able to look at the recording and drill in on them at your leisure later on. But I'm going to just blow right through them. Sam Mady, by the way, is the author of Climate Action Now's hugely popular Substack newsletter called Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope. And Liz, would you put a link to that, to our Substack page in the chat? Sam's job is to put a short dose of climate hope into your inbox every morning with a single action that you can take in just seconds on the CAN app or on the CAN website to help bring about a better world. So let's get going. The age of the internal combustion engine is drawing to a close, as did the age of the horse and buggy before it. You can see the transformation in this chart from RMI. ICE, internal combustion engine market share is falling fast, while EV share is rising. Take a look at this chart from our world in data. What matters here is the shape of the curve. It's exponential. You can see it again in this chart from the International Energy Association, or the International Energy Agency, the leading international body that tracks and forecasts the energy transition. And you see it in the cell of batteries, the main component of EVs. Let's take a more granular view. Consider EV adoption by country. In Norway, in 2023, EVs comprised 93% of new car sales, 60% in Sweden. EV detractors have been telling us that EVs don't work well in cold climates. Apparently, the Scandinavians, who are famous for their balmy climate, didn't get the memo. Of course, Norway and Sweden are small car markets. In the United States, EV sales are growing rapidly until they were made a culture war issue by the fossil fuel industry and its political allies. Nevertheless, and notwithstanding all the press you've heard to the contrary, EV sales in the US are still growing to now about 10% of total new car sales. But the big story here is China, the world's largest automobile manufacturer and market. 38% of new car sales in China in 2023 were EVs. This is an animated chart from Statista that tells the story. Now, keep your eyes on the black China bar as it goes from the bottom to global dominance at the top of the chart in just 20 years. And hopefully that, okay. Are you guys seeing that? Okay, great. There it is, China rising. So what's behind this incredible transition in China and in the rest of the world? A major factor is investment. In 2022, Reuters estimated that the 37 top global automakers plan to invest 1.2 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in EV and battery investments through 2030. In the US alone, between 2000 and September 2024, companies announced over 208 billion in EV and battery manufacturing, which is estimated to create 240,000 permanent jobs. Most of that investment came in the last 3 years and can be attributed to the Inflation Reduction Act, which Mr. Trump wants to repeal. Perhaps not by accident, most of these investments have been made in red states. This investment, of course, means thousands of jobs for US workers also in red states. So why does Mr. Trump want to kill the EV tax credits and repeal the Inflation Reduction Act? We'll leave that question for our panel, who may want to refer the question to a panel of psychologists. As a result of these massive flows of investment capital, EVs have been getting better and better, and the barriers to EV adoption are dropping rapidly. One such barrier has been the sticker price, which is driven mainly by the cost of the batteries. As you would expect, this has driven down cost of EVs to the critical point where some are reaching cost parity with ICE cars. Notice that EVs are the only class of cars whose prices are going down. If Mr. Trump really wanted to lower the cost of living for Americans, he would be all in on EVs. At the same time, batteries are getting better and better, which removes another barrier to adoption, range anxiety. You can dig into this chart from the EPA later, but it shows a strong trend towards more EVs with longer ranges. And when you need to charge on a road trip, you are more and more likely to find a charging station near you. The end result of all this investment is faster and better cars, greater convenience, and lower costs. This little fellow is the Seagull EV from the Chinese automobile manufacturer BYD, which recently overtook Tesla as the leading maker of EVs. It has a range of 250 miles and costs, drum roll please, less than $10,000. It's not available in the US, as far as I know, and certainly not at that price. You have to ask yourself, why not? That's a great question for our panel, but I'll venture that one answer is the fossil fuel industry won't allow it. The driver of that car never goes to a gas station. Never. Is it any wonder the fossil fuel industry is terrified of EVs? Chinese EV manufacturers now build millions more cars than even Chinese consumers want at lower cost, and this is driving an export boom. And this is why US and the European Union are slapping ever-increasing tariffs on Chinese EVs. They know that in a free market, their domestic automobile industries would be crushed by Chinese competition. And that's why the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act to give US manufacturers and consumers the time and incentives to catch up with the Chinese. The Inflation Reduction Act authorized $392 billion to accelerate clean energy and EV transition. Why? Because if we don't get with the program, China is going to leave us in the dust. It's already happening. The age of the internal combustion engine is drawing to an end. The transition is unstoppable. We've heard that from many people, including boo Elon Musk. The only question that remains is who will be the winners and who will be the losers. If Mr. Trump has his way, China will be the winner and the United States will be the loser. Refusal to accept the reality of this global transition will benefit the US fossil fuel industry in the short term at the expense of American consumers and the US automobile industry in the long term. and help cement China's dominance in some of the most important global industries of the future: automobiles, batteries, solar, and wind. In short, as key executive Steven Center commented recently on Trump's plan to kill the EV tax credit, it would just be dumb. At the same time, continued use of gas cars will saddle American consumers with needlessly higher transportation costs when considering the lifetime cost of ownership, as shown in this comparison by the Environmental Defense Fund. A Chevy Equinox is 29% less expensive over 10 years than its ICE equivalent. That translates into thousands of dollars in savings per American household. And continued use of gas cars will subject all of us to ongoing environmental degradation and air pollution. According to a report from UC Berkeley, a future in which 100% of new US cars are EVs by 2030 would avoid 150,000 premature deaths resulting from air pollution through 2050. In a nutshell, if Mr. Trump has his way, China will win and the United States will lose, with serious consequences for our cost of living, our health, our environment, and our national security. We don't have to stand by passively while this happens. We can all take action today in this action party, tonight and in the days to come, to pressure the Trump administration, our elected officials, and business leaders to stop this misguided assault on EVs and clean energy. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the fossil fuel industry. Your opinion is your superpower. If enough of us raise our voices in support of the EV tax credits and the Inflation Reduction Act, the Trump administration and Congress may, just may, see the wisdom of keeping the United States a player in the EV and clean energy transition. If not, future Americans will remember this as an historic and tragic miscalculation that consigned yet another once dominant US industry to global relevance. So that's my overview. Thank you, everybody. And back to you, Liz.
Thanks so much for that overview, Brett. We'll now transition into our panel discussion moderated by Jessica. As you hear from our panelists, please share any questions that come to mind into the chat. Over to you, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Okay, I am just your humble moderator here, so I'm not going to talk for very long, but I do want to say that I am a longtime EV driver, longer, I think, than almost anybody I know. I've been driving EVs for ever since the first Nissan Leaf. I have not looked back. And so this was a really thrilling presentation for me to hear, and so wonderful to hear about the potential in this wonderful technology. And I think you guys are going to hear some things today that excite you and encourage you. So I just really can't wait to get to our conversation. We are going to be hearing from 3 people today. We will be hearing from Ingrid Malmgren. Ingrid is the Senior Policy Director at Plug in America. Ingrid has over a decade of experience advancing sustainable energy and transportation electrification through research, utility regulatory proceedings, and legislative advocacy. And our second panelist will be Catherine Garcia. Catherine is director of the Clean Transportation for All campaign at Sierra Club, where she works to reduce climate and air pollution from cars, trucks, buses, and ensure that our communities are walkable, bikeable, and transit accessible. She is an electric vehicle expert and an authority on clean mobility. And then our third panelist, Chris Harto, is the Senior Policy Analyst, Transportation and Energy for Consumer Reports, where he leads research on clean vehicles, fuel economy, energy efficiency, clean energy, utility policy, and other energy and environmental topics. Chris has over 15 years' experience performing research and analysis supporting federal and state agencies. And we are going to just go into questions. I'm going to ask each of you one question to start, and then we'll kind of take the conversation as it goes.
But
And
before
Catherine,
that, I just want to cut in because we already reached our first goal. We're at 542 actions already, folks. Great job. Keep the momentum going. I think I'll bump the goal up to 800. All right, back to you, Jessica. Sorry to cut in.
No problem. That is my favorite kind of interruption. Okay, so we will go to our panelists. First, Catherine, I'm going to start with you. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not bad at all and 10 is really bad, how bad would it be to repeal the EV tax credit and why?
Okay, thank you for that question, Jessica, and thank you to everyone that is here joining us today to talk about these vitally important EV tax credits. It's great to have a scale when you have 1 is not bad at all, everything's fine, 10 is really bad. I'm going to say 20. I'm going to say this is a disaster. And the reason why is because we know that these tax credits work. In fact, last year, the Department of Treasury was putting out metrics showing how many cars were being covered, how many people were taking advantage of the point of sale consumer tax credits for both new and used vehicles. And just in 10 short months, at the point of October 2024, $2 billion had been applied to used EVs, new and used EVs last year. So I think we want, in terms of Sierra Club, we're doing everything possible to protect these tax credits, to elevate why EVs are so important. And I'll just leave you, before we move on to my wonderful colleagues here on the panel, I will just say these tax credits were actually moving the needle. And the IRA itself was so impactful that we heard it referred to as the manufacturing renaissance that would drive the economy of the future. So, I know that this EV tax credit is just one portion of that, but as we'll discuss today during this wonderful panel, the EV tax credit was a major part of how we're seeing new manufacturing here in the US.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great answer. All right, well, we'll talk more about all of that, I'm sure, but let's talk to Ingrid for a segment. Ingrid, why are the EV tax credits currently under threat?
Well, there's a few reasons. Part of it is the gas and oil industry. Obviously, there are a lot of very powerful, wealthy people who do not want to see the end of gas stations, the end of the use fossil fuel use. So that's definitely part of it. This administration has very, very clearly an agenda that is scorch the earth, anti-environmental, almost comically so, but very, very anti-EV, anti-anything environmental. And then I think the third piece is that this administration wants to extend the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that provides tax cuts to large corporations and wealthy individuals. And because the majority in the Senate is small, they need to do it through reconciliation, meaning that they can't add a lot of money to, they can't raise the debt limit, and they basically have to come up with money. They're searching in the couch cushions essentially. And so one of the coins in the couch cushions, and it is really like a coin in the couch cushions, are these tax credits. Because we're talking $4 to $7 trillion, and these tax credits are in the billions. So this is definitely changing the couch cushions. And so those are really the three reasons.
And let us just remind everybody that the reason we need to find all of those cuts is so that we can give big, big tax breaks to the billionaires and the corporations. There's no actual need to make these cuts, right? This is all I just wanted to insert that in there. But okay, yeah, thank you for that. And then Chris, let's go to you. Have you seen the EV tax credits play a role in the decision to purchase an EV from your role within Consumer Reports?
Yeah, absolutely. Vehicle costs continue to be one of the biggest barriers for consumers going electric. These tax cuts can greatly reduce that barrier, really shrinking the difference in price between an EV and a gas-powered car. And our data shows that the availability of these tax credits can be a really important motivator for consumers. So yeah, they are really moving the needle for consumers. And I just wanted to add on to Ingrid's answer. They also, the typical EV is going to you're going to spend about $25,000 less going to the fossil fuel industry by buying an EV, and save a significant amount on fuel. But that up, even if when EVs make sense on a total cost of ownership perspective, that upfront purchase price can be a barrier for consumers.
Yep, for sure. Okay, good. Thank you very much. All right, and then Catherine, back to you. If federal EV tax credits are reduced, do you think that states are going to step up to help incentivize EV adoption?
Yeah. So, one so when the IRA was established and we started promoting the federal and the new and used tax credits, one of the things we talked about was that we were seeing drivers stacking the incentives. And so, and this was actually what was taking place before the IRA. Certain residents in particular states were able to take advantage of the tax credit for new vehicles. And so one of the exciting parts about promoting the IRA was that we were seeing folks stacking a state incentive with a utility incentive on top of the federal incentive. And so I think if it was repealed, we would go back to the rebates that are being put in that have sustained in various states, but it really is just mostly blue states that have put in those rebates. In fact, one notable anecdote that we were promoting was that for a while Colorado had very generous tax incentives, and so you were able to get the cheapest EV possible in Colorado specifically. I will point out, though, many states do not have a tax rebate for used vehicles, and so the IRA was the first time we saw a rebate for used vehicles, which are often most Americans actually buy used vehicles as opposed to new vehicles. So that was really important for moving the EV market forward.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. And then that, yeah, makes so much sense. And
Before your next question, just cutting in to say that we've done it again, folks. We blew right past our second goal, so I'm going to go ahead and update our goal again. I think we can make it to 1100, so let's do it.
let's do it. After hearing all this great stuff, don't you want to make sure that these incentives stay in place? So, okay, Ingrid, and this is something I'm really interested in because I've heard even recently that a group of Republican people, Congress members, had signed a letter asking Donald Trump not to get rid of these EV tax credits. Can you talk about why that is, and what about the climate technology incentives in the IRA makes this sort of less than cut and dried for Trump in terms of the Republicans in these districts who are benefiting from these credits and from these incentives?
Yeah, so this was sort of policy genius on the Biden administration's part because they created the Inflation Reduction Act. And as Brett mentioned earlier, and in the quiz that we all learned, 87% of the investment went to red districts, so red states and districts. So, and 60% of jobs. So, since the IRA passed, these red states like Georgia, South Carolina, Texas, North Carolina Arizona, they're starting to see amazing investments. They're right underway. They have battery manufacturing plants, battery recycling plants, EV manufacturing plants. I mean, within like a month or two of the passage of the IRA, we were shopping for an EV, and we looked at the Volkswagen ID4, and they're like, "Yep, they'll be rolling off in Chattanooga, Tennessee." Like Volkswagen totally pivoted because of this policy, and Kia and Hyundai, like all over, all of these auto manufacturers have shifted their EV production to the United States, which is just amazing. I think, was it Catherine, you said the manufacturing renaissance to drive the economy of the future? Like, it truly is that. So there are a lot of Republican senators and Congress people who are going to have to turn around to their constituents and explain why these jobs aren't coming, why all of this economic development is not coming to their districts. So there are, this definitely puts Republican representatives in a bind.
Okay, that was great. Thank you. And then I'm seeing an interesting question here in the chat, Chris, that I'm going to pass on to you. Ron says, I'm hearing reliable expectations throughout the industry that there's no worry if the $7,500 EV tax credit goes away because the OEMs will just lower their EV prices by $7,500. Wow. If that really is the case, that means the current prices are overpriced and we really don't need the tax credit from the government. Private enterprise can just lower their prices now. You seem like someone who can answer that question.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Ultimately, automakers have to price their vehicles at a price consumers are willing to pay, and so we could potentially see some reduction in the sticker prices of some EVs. And unclear if it would be 7,500, but ultimately, the automakers have to be able to build these vehicles profitably and sell them at scale in order to build them profitably. And so yes, so ultimately, whether they can cut the vehicle prices by 7,500 and still want to sell those vehicles is definitely a big question. The prices are continuing to come down. The battery manufacturing is getting a lot better, getting a lot cheaper. So the cost to build these vehicles is declining. So we will hopefully see that with or without tax credits. But to say that these tax credits don't have an effect on consumers or manufacturers, like that's just not going to be true.
Right. Okay. All right. That's great. Thank you. Let's see. And Catherine, what steps can we take to ensure that EV adoption and access is equitable, especially for underserved communities who are most impacted by air pollution and climate change?
Yeah, so we actually put out a report that I can put in the chat. It's called an Achieve Toolkit, and it actually has a lot of these points in terms of talking about how so many underserved communities are facing the burden of air pollution and climate change. And so we want to make sure that these EVs don't just go into the hands of the wealthy, but they are actually adopted by folks that might not be able to that actually need to be saving on their vehicle, that are definitely just trying to find the most least expensive car possible, which is why, as has been discussed before, it is so important to reach cost parity, and it's so important. We have been demanding that these manufacturers produce more affordable cars, because as we know, driving is not affordable. Oftentimes, because people drive, they're paying for fuel, they're paying for parking, registration, maintenance. So oftentimes, driving a car is not affordable. So you really want to be demanding affordable vehicles that are also clean from these manufacturers. So one of the things, of course, is making sure that there are incentives from both utilities, from states, from the federal government. You want to make sure that there's loan programs. And in fact, one of the things we write about is that some local credit unions have better loan programs for people who are purchasing an electric vehicle. One of the things that we haven't talked yet about, but I know it's top of mind for many people, is charging. And so one of the things that could be a barrier is if you don't have a driveway, if you don't have a garage, it is challenging and sometimes more expensive to charge on a fast charger, for example. And so by investing in apartment chargers at apartments, other types of multi-unit dwellings, investing in charging for workplaces, that can actually lower the barrier for people who are just trying to figure out if an EV works for their lifestyle. One other thing is in terms of financing for gig drivers, we have seen EVs now becoming more popular for Uber and Lyft drivers, and there are special incentives and programs that they can take advantage of in order to adopt an EV when there's limited resources.
Oh, that's terrific. What a great answer. Thank you so much. And then Ingrid, I've got a question for you about more from the global standpoint. Would cutting the EV tax credits affect the US's position in the global EV market, especially concerning competition with China, who's just, blowing us all away with EVs right now, and Europe?
Yeah, so I got this question in advance and I did a little digging. I looked at the International Energy Agency, and they have this global EV policy explorer, which is like the super cool tool that tracks policies all over the world. And I sat down and I was able to count over 80 countries that have EV targets. So basically, countries all over the world are moving toward EVs. Norway's at like 94%. EV sales so far this year in Europe are up 31% over last year. China's reached 50% of sales. So the horse is out of the barn. EVs are the future. They are not going away. They are inevitable. But the US auto industry is way behind already. And the IRA is really one of the big benefits of the IRA is that it really catalyzes the US auto industry into making this transition. And the US auto industry can't be globally competitive without manufacturing and selling EVs. The IRA is really, as I mentioned before, big fan of it. It's really well crafted in that it has tax credits for manufacturing on the supply side, and it also has tax credits for consumers on the demand side. So it creates both supply and demand for EVs. It also has tax credits for charging infrastructure so that people, once they get their EVs, will have places to charge them. It'll make it more affordable to build charging installations in communities where you live and work and play. So it'll make it also less expensive because less expensive charging infrastructure means that charging companies don't have to get as high a return on investment, or it'll be easier for them to get that, lowering charging prices. So removing these tax credits is going to make it far more difficult and expensive for automakers to transition to EVs and keep up with global competition.
That was a great answer. Thank you. You guys are all wonderful to listen to. Okay, there's been quite a lot of discussion in the chat, and then also we had some questions planned before about tariffs. Chris, I know this is a fun subject, but there's a lot of discussion about tariffs. How might the tariffs from the Trump administration, even some that apparently were announced today, but just in general, impact the price of EVs for consumers?
Yeah, this is a great question, and to be blatantly honest, I don't fully know. We don't know exactly the full extent of the impact of tariffs. It's going to affect different automakers differently. It's going to depend on how their supply chains are set up. But we do know that it's going to create costs and chaos and confusion for the industry, and that's not great. And ultimately, it's probably going to drive up the cost of all kinds of vehicles, regardless of how they're powered. So yeah, lots of chaos and confusion and uncertainty is the outcome from tariffs.
Okay. Good times. All right. There's another question that we got from Ron in the chat, and I guess any of you can take this because I'm not sure which of you feel like you want to do I guess it's sort of a civics question, but isn't it true that Trump himself cannot repeal the IRA, that Congress has to do that? And I guess I'll just add as a follow-up, if that is true, then how exactly would Congress go about doing that? Catherine, Ingrid, Chris, anyone?
Yeah, I'll start off and say that yes, Congress has to act to end these tax credits. There are things that the administration could do in terms of changing, adjusting some of the rules potentially that could make them more difficult to get for consumers. But ultimately, Congress needs to act to eliminate these credits. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about the fun details of reconciliation.
Yeah, I do you want to do it, Catherine, or I can
You
talk
can
about
go.
reconciliation? So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big goals of this administration is to extend the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which was passed under the first Trump administration. This is the one, Jessica, as we to reiterate, that provides tax cuts to wealthy corporations and individuals. I think you have to be making over $400,000 to get any sort of tax benefit from this, from these tax cuts. As I mentioned, they're set to expire this year. But because the Senate doesn't have 60 votes for this, so they don't have a filibuster-proof majority, so not getting too wonky here, it would have to happen through this process called reconciliation. And this basically means that the bill can't add to the long-term deficit or change spending or revenues. There's all these rules with reconciliation. So that's where we get to the couch cushions. In order to continue these tax cuts for the wealthy, the Republicans who want to potentially get rid of these, use these tax credits, the money that would be saved from the federal government by eliminating these tax credits, they would need to find money. So they're thinking about eliminating the tax credits, and so they're looking everywhere they can. So now I've sort of lost my train of thought. It looks like there would be $4.5 trillion is what they're looking for. And so these tax credits, I don't remember the exact amount of how many billions that they could contribute and all of the IRA savings. But it's not even going to come close to reaching the amount of money that is necessary to extend these tax cuts for the wealthy.
And I'll just jump in here just to say that obviously this is really complicated. The Trump administration can't just come in one swoop and just get rid of the IRA. It does go to Congress, and so this is why activism is so important. And there actually has been a lot of pushback. And so one of the things we've seen is actually a letter from Republicans saying, these benefits are helping my constituents. They're helping our states. And so we've seen a series of letters. We've seen interviews. We've seen businesses speak up. And in terms of our activism, we're allied with clean energy folks, with health folks, because of the benefits of clean cars on health, of course, the environment, faith advocates, the business community. They are all saying, we need these EVs and we need to protect the tax credits. Manufacturers specifically have actually changed their trajectory of where they're manufacturing these cars, because one of the things we haven't talked about is that the tax credits were actually set up in a way that incentivized manufacturers for producing these vehicles and the batteries here in the US. So they have actually been opening up plants for the past few years, spending billions in investments in order to produce these cars here, which would allow for more of the vehicle models to be benefiting from the tax credits. And in fact, the manufacturer tax credits have been a game changer as well for EV manufacturing here in the US. So We would love for all of your voices to join us and to fight for these tax credits so that we continue benefiting from them.
And I will just add, as someone who does a lot of work on messaging, I don't know if any of you three follow the Environmental Polling Consortium, really wonderful organization, and they send out polling, they talk to message groups and kind of figure out the best way to talk about these things. And when we're talking to right-leaning voters, apparently, and we're talking about things like EV credits, we want to talk more about saving money because they're cost efficient. And we want to emphasize that, whereas with left-leaning voters, we can talk more about climate change. But if you're calling your Republican reps, at least when I give people advice to do this, really focus on the savings and the fact that we are literally hanging on to an old technology. I always equate it when I make TikTok videos that we're holding on to horse and buggies when the rest of the world is moving on to rocket ships. And that really frames it in a way that just makes us look kind of dumb for doing what we're doing. So that's a good way when you're talking to your Republican representatives, maybe focusing on that a little bit. But anyway, okay, we had another question
Before
in
the
chat.
next question, sorry, we have
Yep, no
passed our
problem.
goal again. So I think we have 14 minutes left. I'm going to suggest we do one more push, see if we can make to 1,250. So 100 more actions in these last 13 minutes. We can do it, folks. Go for it.
Okay, and now we have a couple of just nuts and bolts questions. We have a question from David. Which EVs available in the US now have or will have solid state batteries?
I can jump in on that. Right now, I'm not aware of any EVs on the market today that have solid state batteries. There's a number of manufacturers who are discussing putting solid state batteries in vehicles by the end of the decade. I know Toyota has talked a lot about solid state. I think there's a few others, but not yet, but coming soon.
Okay, and then sorry for the noise in the background if you can hear it. The other very nuts and bolts question is just so which of these incentives are available right now? Like if I go to buy an EV today, can I still get this federal $7,500 or is it already gone?
No, I can answer that. So the tax credits are available right now as we speak. If you're thinking about getting an EV, if you're considering it, now is a good time to get one. There's up to $7,500 off a new EV. And starting in 2024, the IRS implemented a point of sale tax credit. So basically, you need to go to a dealer that's registered with the IRS for the energy credits online, and you can get that tax credit up front when you purchase a vehicle. You can also use this tax credit for used vehicles, up to $4,000 off of a used EV. And finally, you can access these tax credits through leases as well. So there are a lot of parameters around the tax credits, which we really haven't talked about, the consumer tax credits, but they're really geared towards making sure that these vehicles are affordable to people who need it. These are not tax credits for the wealthy. These are tax credits for people. There's income limits on the new and used EV tax credits. And there's also there's an MSRP limit. So the vehicle you cannot go out and buy a $100,000 vehicle with these tax credits. It would not be eligible for these tax credits. So that being said, there are tax credits being passed on through leases. So manufacturers are passing along the tax credit on through leases. So you can get up to $7,500 off your lease of an EV, which if you're curious about EVs, it's a great way to get into an EV. The technology keeps changing. So in 3 years, when those solid state batteries are out there, you can move on to your next EV. But 7,500 up to 7,500 off of new EVs and up to 4,000 off of used EVs. They're available now. I encourage you to get the upfront tax credit or the lease because regardless what happens with the administration and Congress potentially canceling the tax credits, if you get it at the time of sale, it's in your pocket and you don't have to worry about filing for the tax credit in 2025.
That's a really good point. And John is asking how likely it is that those tax credits are going to survive until the end of 2025. But we probably just really don't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, Congress the House and the Senate have to come together on this reconciliation bill. And yeah, it could, who knows? It could happen pretty quickly. Congress, the Republicans in Congress definitely seem to be very responsive to what the president wants. And so maybe they'll fall into line. Maybe there will be more infighting. We hope.
But it is possible that they strip that part out of the reconciliation bill, right? If enough Republicans say, please don't get rid of these credits, is it possible that that comes out of the final bill?
It is. It is. So that would be a great scenario.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's something that we all know that we can call about then. Just call and say,
Yep.
strip it
those
out.
tax
I mean,
credits.
yeah, we'd like them not to pass it in general, but we could maybe just push especially for that. Okay, let's see here. How much more time do we have? Liz, where are you?
Yes, we are able to go up until 8 p.m. Eastern whenever you need to leave, Jessica. So we can keep
Okay,
it.
so I'm going to do one more question, then I'm going to go and Liz is going to take over because I've got another event to go to. So Michael asked, do you think we might see manufacturers compromise on the US market by blanketing the US market with plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and focusing on selling EVs to non-US marketplaces? Any one of you, Catherine, maybe you want to take that?
Well, we have been, I mean, we have been advocating that they don't just manufacture plug-in hybrids. I mean, and when we see the numbers, EVs are wildly popular. Folks are just demanding EVs, and so I think that I think one thing that was noted a while ago was that we are actually seeing new companies that are only manufacturing EVs, but we haven't seen one company that has been a startup that only manufactures plug-in hybrids. And so we see it as a bridge vehicle. We see it as a vehicle that's helping to introduce folks that are just wanting to try it out, but we aren't seeing companies that are established in order to bring plug-in hybrids to folks. And so I actually don't see that. And in fact, we are actually seeing, as Brett said in his presentation, the Chinese market is the one that is really successfully bringing EVs to all of these various countries. They are exporting EVs wildly throughout the world, and so I don't actually see. I don't see US companies being successful there unless they were to really seriously go all in on EVs.
Thank you for that answer, Catherine. And Jessica had to drop for her next event, so I will be your moderator for the final few minutes. But Ingrid or Chris, any replies you'd like to add to that question that Jessica had asked?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that EV sales are 10% of the market now, and 92% globally, 92% of people who are driving EVs now want their next car to be an EV. Like, people love I drive an EV. Chris drives an EV. Like, people love their EVs. Once you start driving an EV, and they are a little bit different, but they're awesome to drive. They're fast, they're fun, they're silent, and you will not miss going to the gas station. And people do not want to go back to gas cars.
I totally resonate with that, Ingrid. I would love for my next car to be an EV. With that, we'll transition into a reflection question that I would love to ask all three of our panelists, which is, with thanks to Christiana Figueres and the Outrage and Optimism team for this reflection question, would you tell us something that makes you outraged and something that you are optimistic about? And Catherine, would you like to jump in first?
Sure, yeah. So I'll start with, and by the way, Christina has a wonderful podcast that I listen to that's called Outrage and Optimism. So I wanted to plug that, and it's a wonderful podcast. I always learn a lot. So in terms of this, the advocates here in this room and all across the country worked so hard to set up strong federal and state regulations and incentives. We really strived the last, several decades to make sure we were setting up the EV market for success. And so it is pretty soul crushing that Trump is coming after and attacking all of the amazing policies that we all worked on so that we could help protect the planet and also protect public health and get those benefits across the country. So it is really, really painful to watch all of the attacks. But there is a little plug that I have that is bringing me hope. Several of our groups in our coalition host Drive Electric Earth Month every April. And so I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat to these community events that help celebrate electric vehicles. If you are curious about electric vehicles and driving one in your community, I encourage you to put in your zip code and see if there's an event near you over the course of the next month. And I've been to these events for years, and I always love talking to folks that are interested in driving EVs and talking to people who have been driving EVs for years.
Well, that sounds awesome. I'll have to check that out and see if I can go to one. Ingrid or Chris, what would you like to share with this reflection question?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm really outraged by the amount of misinformation that we've seen pushed about EVs throughout the media, social media, pretty much everywhere you go, you're seeing kind of just misinformation and frankly often lies about the EV ownership experience and what it's like to own and drive an EV. But on the flip side, there's no substitute for direct experience. And we're really seeing within our surveys talking to people that as people actually get direct firsthand experience with these vehicles, they love them. And we see purchase interest go way through the roof as people gain more experience with these vehicles. So as more people buy EVs, as you see more EVs in your neighborhood, in your community, your friends and neighbors buy EVs, you get behind the wheel of these vehicles and just get to feel how awesome they are to drive and learn from other folks who, how great it is to not have to go to the gas station once a week. I plug in every day when I get home, never have to worry about it. It's just such a better driving experience. So yeah, I'm hopeful about the more people gaining more experience with these great vehicles.
Definitely, Chris. Yeah, that acceleration experience. I still remember the first time I drove an EV. So I feel that. And we've got about 2 minutes left. Ingrid, you want to bring us home with your response?
Yeah, I'll be super quick. At my outrage, blatant attacks on the environment. Like, seriously, why? Why drill, baby, drill? There's so many better options. And then the disregard for the law in doing it. Just, I'm a rule follower. If you're going to be awful, do it within the confines of the law. So, that is my outrage. My optimism is that EV sales continue to grow. People love their EVs. EVs are here to stay. So, I'm optimistic that in spite of all this chaos and in spite of these attacks and this misinformation and disinformation, I think we're going to get where we need to go, and we're going to do it using electricity.
Awesome. I love to hear that positive comment as our final note here. So with that, our panel discussion has wrapped up and the end of the action party is drawing near. Thank you to everyone who has been taking action while we learned with our amazing panelists tonight. Kaylee, how have we done with taking actions this evening?
Yes, as you can see, we are at 1,330 actions. So I think we passed our goal 3 different times, which is a record, at least in my time at Climate Action Now. So great work, everyone. You should be really proud of yourselves. And thank you so much for being here and helping us advocate for keeping these really important credits in place.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. And panel, by the way, if you have a couple more minutes to do a debrief, we created a breakout room called panel, just for the panel, please. And if you click on the breakout room icon on your Zoom screen and then scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see the panel breakout room and do a join. And hope to see you there. We can debrief and plan our strategy going forward. Thank you again, everybody. Fantastic, great work. So good to see so many new faces as well as really familiar faces as well. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, everyone.